I found out I was pregnant on a Tuesday morning when the light in the bathroom was too bright, and the world felt slightly tilted. I remember because the fan was rattling like it always did and I kept meaning to tell Ethan we should finally replace it, except that suddenly there were two pink lines staring back at me and the fan didn't matter at all. I sat on the cold tile floor with my back against the tub. The test balanced on my knee like it might disappear if I didn't look straight at it. 2 lines. No ambiguity. No gentle easing into the idea. Just a quiet, irrevocable truth. I laughed once, sharp and breathless, then pressed my palm over my mouth like I could shove the sound back inside. My heart was racing, but underneath that was something steadier. Not joy exactly. Not fear either. Something like recognition. So this is happening. I didn't tell Ethan right away. Not because I didn't trust him, at least not consciously. We'd been together 3 years. We lived together. We shared groceries and streaming passwords and inside jokes about the weird neighbor downstairs who vacuumed at midnight. Relationships like that don't usually end with secrets. But I needed time. The thought felt fragile, like glass still warm from the furnace. I wanted to hold it carefully before exposing it to the air. Renee was the first person I told. I invited her over under the pretense of leftover Thai food, and when she showed up with a bottle of wine and I poured myself sparkling water instead, she stopped mid-sentence. "You're pregnant," she said flatly.
Ist daher.
"Do I have a sign on my forehead?" "No," she said, sitting down slowly. "But you're glowing in that I might throw up way." That broke something open. I told her everything. The test. The shock. The way I'd been nauseous for weeks but blamed it on stress. She didn't interrupt. She just listened, nodding, asking questions that were practical and grounding. What did I want? How did I feel? Did I know when I'd tell Ethan? That was the first time I said it out loud. "I want to tell him on my birthday." Renee smiled, soft and careful. "That's kind of perfect." I thought so too. The plan formed easily after that. A small party at the apartment. Nothing big. Just friends. Cake. Drinks. I imagined the moment so clearly I could almost feel it. Me standing there, hands shaking just a little. Everyone smiling as the words left my mouth. I imagined Ethan's face. Surprise first. Then pride. Then that grin he used when he thought something reflected well on him. I ignored the small voice that whispered he'd been distant lately. Coming home later. Always on his phone. I told myself everyone goes through phases. Work stress. Life stuff. It was easier to believe that than pull at a thread that might unravel everything. The weeks leading up to my birthday passed in a blur of nausea and forced normalcy. Morning sickness is a lie, by the way. It's all-day sickness, plus a bonus round at night just to keep you humble. I learned to excuse myself casually, to run the faucet so Ethan wouldn't hear me gagging, to smile through the fog. He didn't notice. That should have told me something. My birthday fell on a Saturday. I woke up early, the apartment quiet except for traffic outside, and padded into the kitchen to start setting up. Streamers. Plates. A half-hearted attempt at making the place look festive. Ethan said he was going out to pick up the cake. "Be back soon," he said, kissing my cheek. He was gone for almost 3 hours. By the time people started arriving, I was buzzing with nerves. Renee squeezed my hand when she came in, her eyes bright with encouragement. Marcus and Leo showed up arguing about sports. Nina hugged me too tightly and told me I looked tired in the way only family can get away with. The apartment filled with sound. Music. Laughter. Glasses clinking. I stuck to sparkling water disguised as a vodka soda and watched Ethan work the room. He was charming when he wanted to be. Eye contact. Jokes delivered just loud enough to be overheard. The version of him everyone liked. I kept catching Renee's eye across the room. She'd give me these tiny nods like we were sharing a secret language. My stomach fluttered. Not from nausea this time. From anticipation. After cake, I told myself. Just wait for cake. At around 9, Ethan clinked his glass. The sound cut cleanly through the noise. My heart lurched. Hard. He waited until everyone was looking at him, then turned to me. For a moment he looked exactly like the man I fell in love with. Soft smile. Focused. Present. "I just want to say," he began, "that Maya is an incredible person." A ripple of approving murmurs. "She's been my partner, my support, my best friend." He held my gaze as he spoke, and something about the intensity made my skin prickle. I'm so lucky to have had her in my life. Had. I brushed the thought away. Overthinking. This is it. This is the moment. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box, beautifully wrapped with a silk ribbon. My breath caught. The room went quiet. Phones came out. Someone gasped softly. For half a second I thought it was a ring. Panic flared. If he proposed, what did I do? Do I still announce the pregnancy? Do I say yes and then add this on top? My mind raced through a dozen futures in the space of a heartbeat. I opened the box. Inside wasn't a ring, just a folded piece of paper. Confused, I looked up at him. He didn't smile back. I unfolded the note. I'm leaving you. You're useless and I deserve better. Your things will be packed by Monday. The words didn't make sense at first. They floated on the page, detached from meaning. I read them again. And again. The room seemed to tilt like the bathroom floor had weeks earlier, only this time there was nowhere to sit. I looked up at Ethan, waiting for the punchline. The laugh. The gotcha. His face was different now. Cold. Almost amused. We're done, he said loudly for everyone. It was fun while it lasted, but I've outgrown this. A few people laughed. Nervous. Confused. Thinking it was some kind of joke. Ethan laughed too. A real laugh. Then he turned, walked to the door and left. The sound of it closing echoed through the apartment. No one moved. The silence pressed in, thick and heavy. I stood there with the note shaking in my hand, the pregnancy announcement burning my throat like acid. Everyone was watching me. Waiting. I felt something settle inside my chest. Not calm. Not peace. Something colder. Sharper. I smiled. Not because I wasn't devastated. I was. Not because I wasn't humiliated. I absolutely was. But because in that moment, with all eyes on me, I realized something Ethan never would. He thought he'd ended the story. He had no idea what chapter he just started. The silence didn't last long. Renee crossed the room first. She didn't say anything. She just took the note from my hand, read it once, then again slower. Her jaw tightened in a way I recognized. The way it did right before she tore into someone. He's a coward, she muttered. That seemed to unlock everyone else. Voices rose all at once. What the hell was that? Is he serious? Do you want me to call him? I'll kill him. Marcus was already halfway to the door before Leo stopped him. Nina wrapped an arm around my shoulders like she was afraid I'd tip over. I nodded, smiled, said I was fine, thanked people for coming. The words came out automatically like muscle memory. Hosting instincts die hard. I even cut the cake, passed out slices, sang along when someone tried to restart the music and then quickly gave up. It felt surreal, like I was watching myself from across the room. A woman calmly handing out dessert at the funeral of her own life. Clara left early. She claimed she felt sick, which in hindsight was almost funny. At the time I barely registered it. My focus was narrowed to staying upright, staying composed. Not crying. Not screaming. Not telling the truth burning in my chest. By midnight, the apartment was empty except for Renee. She refused to leave despite my protests. She made up the couch with a blanket she found in the hall closet and handed me a glass of water like I was a child who'd just run a fever. The second the door closed behind the last guest, I collapsed. It wasn't graceful. I didn't sink quietly onto the floor. I sobbed. Loud, messy, hiccuping cries that seemed to come from somewhere deep and cracked open. Renee sat beside me and pulled me into her chest, one hand rubbing slow circles between my shoulder blades. She didn't tell me everything happens for a reason. She didn't say I'd be better off. She just held me and let me fall apart. When the tears finally slowed, when my throat was raw and my head ached, I pulled back and wiped my face with the sleeve of my shirt. I was going to tell him tonight, I whispered. Renee frowned. Tell him what? I'm pregnant. The word landed heavy in the quiet room. She blinked once, then nodded. Okay. That was it. No gasp. No panique. Just okay. I kind of suspected, she added gently. You've been weird. And glowing. And also threatening to throw up at any given moment. That almost made me laugh. I told her everything then. About the test. The timing. The way I'd planned to share it after cake. How I'd imagined Ethan's face. Renee swore under her breath. Creative, detailed swearing. He doesn't know, I said, more to myself than to her. No, she agreed. He doesn't. Something about the way she said it made me sit up straighter. I also found some things, I continued. My voice felt steadier now, like the worst of the storm had already passed. 2 weeks ago, I was looking for a stamp in his desk drawer. Renee raised an eyebrow. That sentence never ends well. I pulled my phone from the table and opened the folder of screenshots I'd taken. Credit card statements. Hotel charges. Restaurants I'd never been to. Jewelry purchases I'd certainly never received. Then the messages. Texts filled with emojis and plans. Casual intimacy. Familiärstjorthan. Saved under an initial. See, Renee's eyes scanned the screen. Her expression shifted from anger to something colder. Clara, she said quietly. I nodded. It made sense in a way that hurt worse than not knowing. Clara, who'd been in my kitchen, who'd borrowed my sweater once and never returned it, who'd laughed too loud at Ethan's jokes and always knew what he was talking about. We sat there until dawn, the city slowly waking outside the windows. We talked through everything. Options. Boundaries. What came next? Renee asked if I was going to tell Ethan about the baby. Not yet, I said immediately. She searched my face. Are you sure? Yes. I wasn't being vindictive. I wasn't trying to punish him. I just knew with a certainty that surprised me that he didn't get to know until I was ready. Not when he was still drunk on his own cruelty. Not when he thought he'd won. He'll find out, I said. Just not on his terms. Renee studied me for a long moment, then nodded. You're terrifying when you get like this. I smiled. For real this time. Morning light crept into the apartment, revealing the mess the party had left behind. Streamers sagging. Half-empty glasses. The cake box still open on the counter. The future I'd imagined was gone. Shattered in public, no less. But beneath the grief, beneath the anger and the shock, something else was taking shape. Resolve. Ethan thought he'd humiliated me. Thought he'd controlled the narrative. Thought I'd crumble quietly once the applause died. He had no idea how much I already knew, or how patient I could be. I woke up late the next morning to the smell of coffee and something warm and buttery. For a disorienting second, I forgot everything. Then memory slammed back into place and my stomach rolled. Renee was in the kitchen flipping pancakes like this was any other Sunday. Sit, she ordered when she saw me. You need to eat. I managed a few bites before nausea took over. She didn't push it. Just slid a glass of ginger tea toward me and pretended not to watch every sip like it was a medical procedure. Ethan didn't come home that day. That was both a relief and its own kind of cruelty. I spent the hours pacing, alternating between numbness and a buzzing anger that had nowhere to go. When I couldn't stand the quiet anymore, I started making lists. Rent, utilities, doctor appointments, legal questions, things I could control. Survival has a way of narrowing your focus. Monday morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in years. My voice sounded strange in my own ears when I did it, tight and careful. After that, I booked a doctor's appointment to officially confirm the pregnancy. Seeing it on the calendar made it real in a way the test hadn't. Around noon, my phone buzzed. Ethan, I'll be by at 7 to get my things. Make sure you're not there. I stared at the screen. Read it again. The entitlement of it hit harder than the cruelty. Like I was an inconvenience to be managed. I typed back a single word. No. The phone rang immediately. I declined the call. It rang again. Declined. Then I called Renee. By 6:30, the apartment was full. Marcus stood by the door, arms crossed, all solid presence and quiet threat. Leo hovered near the kitchen, pretending to reorganize cabinets that didn't need it. Nina stayed close to me on the couch, her hand warm and steady on my knee. Ethan arrived exactly on time. His confidence faltered the second he saw the room. The crowd. The wall of people between him and me. What's this? He demanded, forcing a laugh that didn't quite land. Marcus stepped forward and handed him a suitcase. This is what you're taking tonight. Ethan frowned. I need more than this. You don't, Marcus said calmly. You need to leave. Ethan's gaze finally found me. I met it without flinching. Something in my expression must have registered because his tone shifted. This is ridiculous, he said. Just let me get my stuff. I stood up slowly. My legs felt steady. That surprised me. Consider yourself lucky I haven't changed the locks yet, I said. We can discuss the rest of your belongings when I've had time to process your little performance. He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. Took the suitcase. Left. The door shut. Again. This time I didn't cry. The next morning I called a locksmith. Watching him change the locks felt ceremonial. Like sealing something shut for good. When he handed me the new keys, they were heavier than the old ones. Or maybe that was just what they represented. That afternoon Sergio texted me. Hey, I should have said something earlier. But Ethan's been seeing Clara. We saw them together a couple months ago. I'm really sorry. Vindication hit like a punch to the ribs. I'd known. Of course I'd known. But confirmation still hurt. I didn't respond right away. I just sat there, phone in my hand, breathing through it. I spoke to a lawyer the next day. About the lease. About finances. About what I needed to protect myself. The clarity was grounding. We weren't married. No shared assets beyond what we'd accumulated together. Manageable. Clean as these things go. 2 weeks after the party, Ethan texted again. We should talk. I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop near the apartment. Public. Neutral. Daytime. He looked awful. Unshaven. Dark circles under his eyes. His clothes wrinkled like he'd slept in them. He launched into an explanation before I'd even sat down. How he'd been unhappy. How he'd felt trapped. How a clean break was better for everyone. I let him talk. There was power in silence. When he finally paused, I asked, "Is Clara making you happy?" The color drained from his face. "What?" he said. "No. I mean, that's not." I cut him off. "I know about the hotel charges. The jewelry. The credit card you thought I wouldn't find. Just be honest for once." He deflated. Shrunk in on himself. I told him he could collect the rest of his things that Saturday. Marcus would be there. After that, communication would go through my lawyer. His voice squeaked when he repeated the word lawyer. "We don't need that," he said quickly. "We can work this out ourselves." I leaned forward. "You made your choice very clear on my birthday. I'm just respecting it." As I stood to leave, he reached out and grabbed my wrist. Not hard. Desperate. "How are you going to afford the apartment?" he asked. "Your job barely covers half the rent." And that was the moment it clicked. I smiled. "Actually, I've been covering more than half for the past year. You might want to worry about how you're going to manage without that." His face went slack. I walked out of the cafe feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Not because I'd won, but because I finally saw him clearly. Saturday came. Marcus supervised. I spent the afternoon at a prenatal yoga class, my hand resting on my stomach, focusing on breath and balance. When I came home, the apartment felt emptier. And somehow finally like mine. The doctor's office smelled like antiseptic and citrus cleaner. The kind of smell that makes everything feel clinical and irreversible. I sat on the edge of the exam table with crinkly paper sticking to the backs of my thighs and tried not to think too far ahead. 10 weeks. That was the number that kept echoing in my head as the technician pointed at the screen. A tiny flickering rhythm. Proof. I cried quietly, more from relief than anything else. Relief that my body was doing what it was supposed to do. Relief that something in my life was steady, even if everything else felt like it was sliding sideways. I didn't tell many people. Just Renee. My mom eventually. Not Ethan. Not yet. I opened a new bank account. Froze the joint credit card. Redirected my paycheck. It felt strange dismantling a shared life piece by piece, but each step brought a small sense of control back. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was building something new. The gossip traveled faster than I expected. Clara and Ethan were very much a known thing now. Not hidden. Not subtle. Apparently, Ethan had been telling people we'd been basically over for months. That we were just waiting out the lease. That I'd been holding him back. I let the story sit. A few weeks later, the first crack appeared. Marcus mentioned in passing that Ethan had been complaining about money. That his job wasn't as solid as he'd made it seem. That Clara wasn't thrilled with the reality of dating a man whose lifestyle didn't match his promises. I listened. Filed it away. 2 weeks after our coffee shop meeting, my phone started buzzing nonstop. Unknown numbers. Missed calls. Then a text from Nina. "People are saying you're pregnant." So it had reached him. The messages from Ethan came fast after that. "Is it true? Why didn't you tell me? We need to talk. This involves me too." I didn't answer. Then, "I'm coming over." That one I responded to. "Do not come to my apartment. I will call the police." Silence followed. For exactly 2 days. On the third night, I was in bed with a book balanced on my stomach, one hand resting there without thinking. The bump was small but undeniable now. A gentle curve that made everything feel more real. I heard a car door slam. Footsteps on the walkway. Then pounding. Not knocking. Pounding. "Maya!" Ethan shouted. His voice was thick, slurred. "Open the door." My heart slammed into my ribs.
He sat frozen, listening.
"We need to talk about our baby," he said, voice cracking. "You can't do this without me." I considered my options. Call the police. Call Marcus. Hide and wait. Then I heard him cry. Not loud. Just broken. Words blurring together. Apologies. Demands. Please. I slipped out of bed, pulled on a robe and approached the door. I didn't open it. "You're drunk," I said through the wood. "Go home." "I need to see you," he insisted. "I need to know it's real." I closed my eyes. Took a breath. One hand pressed protectively to my stomach. "Yes," I said.
"I'm pregnant."
"It's yours." "I'm 18 weeks." There was a dull thud against the door. Forehead or fist, I couldn't tell. "She left me," he said quietly. "Clara. She said I lied about everything." I almost laughed. Almost. That sounds familiar, I said. He let out a hollow sound that might have been a laugh. I messed up, he whispered. Please, just let me in. No, I said. Firm. Calm. Not like this. I offered him a meeting the next morning. Tentham. A cafe on Main Street. I told him if he wasn't there on time or if he showed up drunk, that was it. He agreed. Softly. Like someone who knew they were out of chances. I listened as he walked away. Uneven footsteps. A car engine that wasn't his. Back in bed, my phone lit up with a text.
I'm sorry.
For everything. I'll make it right. I didn't respond. Words had always been easy for Ethan. Actions were what I was waiting for. I arrived at the cafe 10 minutes early and chose a table by the window where I could see the door. I wanted to be in control of at least one thing. The smell of burnt espresso clung to the air and the chairs scraped too loudly against the floor. Everything felt sharper than usual. Ethan walked in at 9:55. He looked like he hadn't slept. Same clothes as the night before. Eyes red. Hands restless. He spotted me and hesitated like he wasn't sure he deserved to sit down. He ordered before I could say anything. A decaf latte for me. I watched the barista set it on the counter and felt a small bitter irony twist in my chest. I hadn't had coffee in months. The smell alone made my stomach turn. When he brought it over, I slid it back toward him. I drink herbal tea now. Oh, he said, startled. Right. That about summed it up. He started apologizing immediately. For the party. The note. The cheating. The lies. Showing up drunk. Losing control. It came out fast and tangled like he was afraid if he stopped talking I'd disappear. I let him. There was a strange power in saying nothing. When he finally ran out of breath, I asked, "What do you want, Ethan?" He blinked. "I want to be involved. I want to do the right thing. Maybe we could try again." I laughed. Not sharp. Just surprised. Like he'd suggested we move to Mars. No, I said. Simply. His face tightened. So that's it. That's been it since my birthday, I replied. You just didn't notice. I told him how things would work going forward. Doctor appointments. Child support. Custody. Structure. Schedules.
No surprises. No theatrics.
When I mentioned my lawyer, his shoulders sagged. You're being cold, he said quietly. Calculated. I met his gaze. You were cold and calculated when you handed me that note in front of everyone. The difference is I'm doing this to protect a child. You were protecting your ego. That shut him up. I slid a folder across the table. Ultrasound photos. Due date. Medical information. The draft agreement my lawyer had prepared. He opened it slowly like it might bite. I'm not keeping you from your child, I said. But trust doesn't get reset because you're scared now. It gets rebuilt with consistency. He nodded. Once. Hard. As I stood to leave, he reached for my wrist again. I stepped back before he could touch me. Does Clara know? He asked. That's not my information to share, I said. And it's not my job to manage your guilt. I walked out without looking back. The weeks that followed were quieter. Not peaceful exactly, but steadier. Ethan signed the child support agreement without argument. He found a new job. Lower pay. Less prestige. More honesty, at least on paper. He started asking real questions about the baby. Development. Health. Plans. Sometimes he came to appointments. Sometimes he didn't. I noticed which days he showed up and which he didn't. I focused on preparing my space. A crib from IKEA that took 3 hours and nearly ended a friendship. A second-hand changing table. A soft mobile of stars my mom sent in the mail. One evening, Ethan came by to help assemble the crib after I finally admitted defeat. We worked in silence for a while, passing screws and Allen keys like strangers. You were never useless, he said suddenly. I was just too self-absorbed to see your value. I didn't respond. Some apologies don't need an answer. By the time my due date loomed close, something had shifted. Not forgiveness. Not forgetting. Acceptance. I wasn't waiting for him to become someone else anymore. I was ready for what came next. Labor lasted 32 hours. Long enough for time to lose meaning. Long enough for the memory of that birthday party to surface in flashes between contractions. The box. The note. The way my knees had almost given out. Life has a brutal sense of symmetry. Renee was there from the start, her calm voice cutting through the chaos when mine dissolved into panic. She reminded me to breathe. Told me when I was doing it even when I swore I wasn't. Ethan arrived later, awkward and pale, carrying a teddy bear so big it barely fit through the hospital door. I almost laughed when I saw it. Almost. When Arya was finally placed on my chest, slick and warm and impossibly real, everything else fell away. The room, the noise, the past. There was only her weight, her tiny fingers curling instinctively against my skin. Ethan cried when he held her. Not gracefully, not performatively, just quiet, overwhelmed tears he didn't seem able to stop. It was the most honest I'd ever seen him. The weeks that followed blurred together. Feeding schedules, sleepless nights, learning how to function on fragments of rest. My mom came for 2 weeks and reorganized my entire kitchen while insisting it made more sense this way. I let her. I was too tired to argue. Ethan came by 3 times a week. Always scheduled. Sometimes late. Sometimes perfect. He brought diapers. Takeout. Once, an absurd tiny leather jacket that Arya would outgrow before it was ever cold enough to wear. We argued occasionally. We laughed sometimes too. It wasn't friendship. It wasn't family. It was something functional. I repainted the living room a soft sage green while Arya napped in her bassinet. The apartment felt lighter. Mine. A year passed. On my birthday we kept it small. Renee. Marcus.
Nina.
A few people who'd proven themselves. Ethan stopped by briefly, left a bracelet with Arya's birthstone and didn't stay. That night, after everyone left, I sat on the floor of Arya's room and opened a small memory box. Her hospital bracelet. A lock of dark hair. The positive pregnancy test. And the note. I held it for a long moment, then placed it back where it belonged. Not as a wound. As a marker. Of the moment everything broke open. And the moment I began rebuilding something stronger in its place. Arya arrived after 32 hours of labor that stripped time down to something primal and meaningless. Minutes stretched. Hours folded in on themselves. At one point I remember staring at the clock on the wall and thinking it was broken because surely no one could hurt this much for this long and still be moving forward. Renee never left my side. She fed me ice chips, talked me through contractions, reminded me over and over that pain wasn't the same thing as danger. When I said I couldn't do this anymore, she leaned in close and said, "You already are." Like it was the simplest truth in the world. Ethan arrived halfway through. He hovered, unsure where to stand, what to do with his hands. He brought a teddy bear so big the nurse had to angle it sideways through the door. And I almost laughed despite myself. It was ridiculous. On brand. Earnest in a way that would have once annoyed me and now just felt human. When Arya was finally placed on my chest, slick and warm and blinking at the world like she was offended by the brightness of it all, something in me cracked open and rearranged itself permanently. Her weight grounded me. Her cry cut through every lingering doubt. This was real. She was real. Ethan cried when he held her. Quietly. Like he didn't trust himself to make noise. His face went blotchy and his nose ran, and for once he didn't try to hide it or make it look better than it was. Renee caught my eye and raised her brows slightly, a silent acknowledgement of the moment. The weeks after were chaos in its purest form. Sleep deprivation blurred days together. Feeding schedules felt like elaborate math problems I was failing repeatedly. My mom came to stay for 2 weeks and reorganized my kitchen because apparently my system was unhinged. I let her. I would have let her alphabetize the air if it meant I could nap for 20 minutes. Ethan showed up consistently, 3 days a week. Always scheduled. Sometimes late. Sometimes painfully on time. He brought diapers. Wipes. Takeout. Once, a tiny leather jacket that Arya would outgrow before the season even changed. I thanked him anyway. We argued occasionally. Mostly about timing. Sometimes about tone. Never about Arya. On that we were aligned. I repainted the living room a soft sage green during naps, music low, sunlight slanting across the floor. The apartment slowly transformed. His things disappeared completely. Baby gear multiplied like it was reproducing when I wasn't looking. Somehow it felt fuller and calmer at the same time. Work shifted too. I picked up remote contracts, social media management, editing. Not glamorous but flexible. Enough. The landlord let me renew the lease in my name without a fight. And I cried after hanging up the phone, overwhelmed by the relief of it. Life didn't magically become easy. It became honest. Somewhere in the middle of all this, Caleb appeared. He was the grocery delivery guy at first. Polite. Quiet. Always asked where I wanted things set down. Then he started leaving little notes on receipts. Harmless dad jokes. Tips from his sister who had 2 kids under 4. One day, when I was running on fumes and hadn't showered in an embarrassing amount of time, he asked if I wanted help carrying in the water cases. I hesitated, then nodded. He didn't flinch at the mess. Didn't comment. Just helped. We talked. About school. About sustainability. About how sleep deprivation makes you forget words mid-sentence. It wasn't a whirlwind. It wasn't a rescue. It was gentle and slow and optional, which was exactly what I needed. A year after the party on my birthday, I hosted again. Small. Intentional. Renee. Marcus.
Nina.
A few people who had earned their place in my life. Ethan stopped by briefly with a bracelet set with Aria's birthstone. He didn't linger. He didn't try to rewrite the past. Later that night, after everyone left and Aria slept in her crib, I opened the memory box in her closet. Her hospital bracelet. A lock of dark hair. The positive pregnancy test. And the note. I held it for a long moment. Not with anger. Not even sadness. With clarity. That note hadn't ended my story. It had forced me into the truest version of it. I placed it back in the box and closed the lid gently. Then I went to check on my daughter, who sighed softly in her sleep, utterly unconcerned with the roads that led her here. And for the first time in a long while, I felt completely unmistakably at peace.